It's me, it's TRG, the Ramblin Gambler, and this is my Casino Combat podcast. It's episode Yo 11. Sadly, that's kind of what I know about craps at this point. So, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, non-binary persons, children of all ages and persuasions who are of legal age, this podcast discusses gambling and casinos. Gambling is a morally questionable life choice. Do not gamble with money you cannot afford to lose. Do not gamble with money you need to pay your bills. My past performances are not indicative of anyone's future results, including my own. If you have a gambling problem, contact your local problem gambling hotline. If you do not know the phone number for your local problem gambling hotline, send an email to help@casinocombat.com. We will find that phone number. We will make sure you have that phone number. Everything I'm going to share with you in this podcast is based in fact. Names and dates have been altered to protect the innocent and the guilty. Minor items unrelated to outcomes may be omitted in the interest of brevity and clarity. There, all done. I've had some feedback that my first rundown of progressive and regressive wagering concepts as part of a complete wagering strategy was good, but a bit complicated and moved fairly quickly for some people. So while I'm not going to do an actual questions segment today, I am going to do that core concept again, with more focus on the ideas and less focus on the examples. I've got a very important casino wisdom for you today, a quick travel segment that shows it isn't all sunshine and roses, and we will finish with a VIP lounge story about meeting and eventually finding a casino ally who is the father of a pro wrestling and television star. Next, core concepts. As I said, I'm going to relook at progressive and regressive wagering as part of a complete wagering strategy. And again, I didn't invent either of these concepts. I read about them in books. I'm sure other people have merged the two concepts together. I don't know any of them, but I'm sure that's happened. And I know plenty of players who do a much less precise version of this based just on instinct, watching other patterns, watching other people's results. I just prefer to take the instinct out of the process. If we are playing a game with a very small house advantage, regardless of what happened in the past, the chances of the next hand or the next spin of the wheel being a win or a loss are still 50-50. Unless you're counting cards or a dice manipulator, the next result is random. If the ball on a roulette wheel has landed on a red number the past 20 spins, the odds are still very close to 50-50 that it will land on red on the next spin. And the only reason it's not 50-50 is because there's always one or two green zeros that kind of skew the odds away from truly 50-50 to create a house advantage. In the previous episode where I discussed this, I shared stories of both progressive and regressive wagering going off the rails in my own life during my own testing. And for some people that wouldn't matter. It would just be, well, that's the nature of the game. I'm gambling. These things happen. Sometimes it just becomes truly a mess and I get crushed really bad. And that's a choice. It is. I'm not, that's the choice they want to make. That's fine. But it wasn't a choice I was willing to make. I just wasn't going to accept the idea that, oh, well, sometimes things go wrong and you've got to go re-earn most of a bankroll to even try again. I didn't see how that was going to work for me. So I decided to take both concepts and create something that was a combination, a merging of the two. And then I was going to use that to take all the emotion and instinct and made-up pattern recognition out of the wagering process. And I decided that the process needed, again, in air quotes, exit ramps to get me out of the table or out of the building if things were going to go too far in either direction. So let's look at progressive wagering. In its most primitive form, it works like this. You bet $1 each play until you win. And once you've won a hand or a spin, then you add $1 to the next wager. And clearly, it could be 5 or 10 or 50 or 100 or 1,000 or 5,000, and that does not matter. But for the sake of illustration, you win that $1 wager, and then you add another $1 to the wager. And you keep doing that until you lose. And it's great if you have a long string of wins. And it's okay if you just keep losing. You're losing a very small amount over and over, and if it continues, you can just decide, okay, well, I guess I've had enough. It's horrible if the 50-50 game that you're playing generates the expected 50-50 results, because you wager and you win, and then you wager double and you lose double, and you've lost on those two hands. But a 50-50 game is the kind of game I think you have to look for to have any chance. So we got a problem with this approach. Now in blackjack, there's also another significant negative to consider. One of the great things about blackjack is that splits and or doubles give you additional opportunities when the house is at a disadvantage. When you make those plays, you are taking additional risk. If you keep adding $1 every time you win a hand, eventually, maybe you have a $10 wager or a $15 wager. It's a wager bigger than you really should make for the amount of money you started with if you sized your bankroll correctly for a $1 wager. So you get in that situation and you should be making a double or a split followed by a double or whatever the strategy chart calls for, and suddenly that wager that was really too big is now 2 or 3 wagers that are really too big. And if you win after doing that, it is glorious. It is wonderful. The dealer is stacking up those chips and you've had that great win. But if you don't win, you have just crushed your bankroll. And that's fine if you're the type of person that has plenty of money, doesn't care about losing, and is just happy to have fun. Then you'll just go to the ATM or go to your bank or whatever you happen to do, and you'll just get more money and you'll continue playing. But I want to protect the bankroll, grow the bankroll, take profits out of the bankroll, and still have the bankroll available when I want to do the whole thing again. So I need to avoid that, oh wow, I won 9 hands in a row, I've just made a $9 wager or a $10 wager, and now I'm making a $30 or $40 wager, $100. So we have one big negative regardless of the game we select, and we have a second big negative if we pick blackjack, which is statistically our best chance of actually winning. So let's consider regressive wagering. The idea here with a regressive wager approach is that if you lose a wager, the next wager should be double. And if you lose that, you double again. And eventually, when you have a win, you will have all of your original money back plus the amount of the original wager as a profit. And this strategy works. There is zero question. Run it on paper, write it all down, insert the win anytime you want, and as long as you've done the basic math correctly, you will see that there is one more unit, one more of the first wager in the bankroll as a profit. There is no question that it works. If you have plenty of money in relationship to the wager, and if you have nerves of steel, because with several losses in a row, 4 or 5, that next bet quickly starts to get large, and the amount you've lost previous to it starts to get large. So that's one problem with just using only this approach. The other problem is that the house knows this system works. And that's why they've set up table minimums and table maximums, and those maximums are set low enough that a martingale player will quickly reach the point where they've hit the limit of the table, even if they have the money and the internal courage, if that's the right word, to play the system out all the way to its end. Quick story, and then one additional negative observation about a martingale betting strategy. Sometimes when casinos open in a new area, mistakes are made by a team that is just becoming professionals with regards to running a casino. Several years ago, I was around a casino just as it was opening, the first few weeks or first month, and the baccarat table had a really big spread between the minimum and the maximum, just out of the ordinary, something like $5 minimum but a $50,000 maximum, and that's really not normal. A normal range would be like $5 to $1,500. I commented on this, and the floor person said that they were allowing players that couldn't get a seat to make wagers on top of other players' wagers to give more people a chance to play. And in a baccarat table, this makes sense. There's no things that the player has to decide. So if I put my money on top of yours, I'm not stuck with a bad decision you might make. The rules of the game make all the decisions. The players have no choices. So I can be 3 people behind you where you're sitting at your chair, and I can add my $5 wager to your $100 wager, and neither of us is taking any more or any less risk. Anyway, sorry, off track. So my thought at the time was, this is a table you could martingale if you had the right bank and you were willing to take the risk. And in a few weeks, the limits at the table were drastically different. They had become much more what I would expect to see, a much tighter range of what was acceptable. The minimum had gone up, and the maximum had come way, 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 way down. Now, I never was fully able to confirm this and 100% know this is true, but I had several people indicate to me that a couple of syndicates of players developed fairly quickly and started martingaling the table. They pooled their money, they made it a big enough amount that they could use that wide spread of bets and make a martingale work effectively. Great minds think alike, I guess. Final item on regressive wagering. It has problems with doubling and splitting in blackjack in 2 ways. First, to do a martingale correctly, if you double or split and lose, you lost double your wager, so the next wager should be 4 times the amount of the wager you just made, and that you just lost 2 of. And at the beginning, that's not that big a deal, right? You don't care. You bet $1, you split, you doubled, you lost $3. But where you were expecting to, if you lost $1, the next bet was going to be $2, now the next bet is $6. And if you lost that, your next bet is $12. Or if you're doing $10, your next bet is $120, and you've already lost $110. So the other problem is, much like what we saw with progressive wagering, you're pressing your bet every time you lose. You're doubling every time you lose. You're doubling every time you lose. Now you've got that larger bet out there, and you need to split it and or double it. And if you lose the hand, the damage is larger than perhaps your bankroll can handle. And if it's not, the next bet probably is, because you now have already doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled the amount of your bet, and now bet 3 times. And so now you've got to do 3 times 2, and you're doing all of that to win $1 or $10. So that's the problems with a full regressive wagering strategy. Both approaches can work. Both can make a real mess. My approach is to combine them and then create exit points to minimize the damage. A small number of losses that causes me to leave, or a point at which I stop putting additional wagers on top of a series of wins. And I don't go up by a whole unit when I win, so that I'm keeping some of my profits, and I don't start pushing up progressively until I've put 2 wins in a row in my profit part. So there are multiple ways that you can control both ends of this so that they don't get out of hand for you, that you get out of the gambling strategy and or out of the table or out of the building. I attended a race car driving boot camp once, and this had nothing to do with casinos at all, but it does create a really interesting illustration of what I feel a gambling wagering strategy needs to do. So they showed us a video of a car with a bowl, kind of like a large salad bowl, and it was secured to the hood of the car. And then they showed us that they put a rubber ball in the bowl, and they showed us that if the car accelerated too quickly, the ball would roll out of the bowl toward the rear of the car. And if you brake too hard, the ball will exit to the front of the car. And obviously sharp corners will cause the ball to exit toward one side or another. But gradual acceleration, gradual braking, gradual cornering will keep the ball inside the bowl. A good driver keeps the ball in the bowl while going as fast as possible. A wagering system with progressive and regressive concepts tries to keep wagers in the metaphorical bowl, winning as much as possible, but then telling you to exit before the car crashes. I talked about the TRG wagering system number 1 in episode 3. It contains all of these elements. If you think I need to review that again, drop me a note via questions@casinocombat.com and spell combat with a K. Next up, today's casino wisdom. Today we are going to discuss casino wisdom number 35. You should want the win more than the action. Gamblers, the house, everyone kind of involved really, always refers to wagering as, again, with air quotes, action. And there are players that just love that feeling, that moment of not knowing what the outcome is going to be, that feeling of winning a large bet. They like having money at risk more than they like winning. They enjoy that so much that it is their motivation for gambling. And I'm not judging. I'm not. Some people climb mountains or jump out of planes for the same reason. For me personally, I enjoy winning. Just winning. Now, sitting at a table and winning ever-increasing amounts of money is very, very fun. And I enjoy it every time it happens. But it is the profit I enjoy most of the winning, not the process. So I try to make a reasonable profit as often as possible. Where I see this go wrong for people is mostly when they're winning. They lose a few times, they have a nice win in front of them compared to when they started, a win that if someone had been standing at the door as they came in and said, "Here, I'll give you this money if you just leave and don't gamble," they probably would have gone, "Oh, okay, sure, that's great. I'll come back a different day and gamble." But in the game, in the moment, they want the action. They want to be gambling. And they want that more than they want the profit that's right there. So instead of stepping back, they want to play. And a portion of their brain, and mine too, is going, "We lost a couple bets. Let's get that money back. And it's fun. Let's do it. Come on. It's fun." It's all true, and I want the win to continue as long as possible, and I want it to be as large as possible. But I want to win more than I want to play. I want the profit more than I want the action. So for me, I try for a small, doable win. And when that happens, when I've got that win in front of me, and in my decision-making process, I love that win. That is my win, and I love it, and I care about it, and I want to keep it. Now, I got to risk some of it because my win could get bigger, and I would love it even more, and I would want to keep it even more. So I've got to play a little, right? I got to play a little more, but I also got to leave with a profit. And that caring about the win more than I care about the action lets me start to make decisions. If I lose one or two hands, I'm thinking about how much I love that win and how much I want that win to come home with me and how much I want that win to be part of my life. And if I lose another hand, then I'm keeping the rest of that 250. And I'm leaving with a win, and a win that I cared about more than I cared about playing. See, I can play blackjack almost any time. Anytime I want, I can play blackjack. But I can't always win. Some days I'm going to lose. I want that to be as small as possible, and I want to have it backed up by lots of wins that I accomplished and fell in love with more than I fell in love with actually playing blackjack. The next segment is the travel segment. So Mrs. TRG is back to work, and given everything going on, that work is more stressful than it usually is. And that groundwork that we did, that I've talked about, that we did back in June and July, it's paying off. We both got a small amount of match play at Casino 1, and Bubba's willing to comp the room willingly. It's not a very long drive, so we have a very low-cost weekend getaway all set up for us and functional, and that's because of what we did in June and July to build that relationship and to put that groundwork in. Look, it's not exactly a full resort experience yet. The spa isn't open, the pool isn't open, the golf course is open, but we don't particularly golf, and if we do golf, we golf poorly. But it is a fun, relatively safe place to get away and have a true sense of being out of the house and off of the normal work week. And it gives Mrs. TRG some much-needed downtime. So my first night of gambling was rough. Very, very rough. I kept reaching a negative exit and walking away with a small part of my buy-in. Mrs. TRG had a solid evening and managed to make up for my struggles. we finished with the evening having lost and spent $2.50, which we actually thought was pretty funny when we counted everything up in the hotel room. The next morning, we decided to take one more try at things, see if we can get a win going before we make the drive home. Unfortunately, as happens, we quickly both hit a point of losing enough that we were ready to just wrap things up and accept that we had a small loss. So we headed home having lost and spent a little more than half a day's pay. I had a client to see on Monday that was very near my local casino, and they had a $25 free bet available to me. So I stopped in and won just a bit less than a day's pay. In the end, call it a wash for the 2 visits. Actually, more probably, and I didn't. If I counted up all the way down to the very small bills in the bankroll, we probably had a minor loss. Less than significant, but we certainly had a loss and spend that was negative this week. So we didn't win. We lost and spent a small amount, as I said. We enjoyed a free hotel room with a great mountain view and a dinner in a restaurant that we like, and we enjoyed trying to take some of the casino's money home, even though we didn't. And that was a much-needed break, and that's the casino lifestyle in small form. It's not living an entire week in a casino, but we did do those casino things, and we enjoyed them, and it cost virtually nothing, and hopefully we can get them back next time. We are going to finish with a trip to the VIP lounge.
Oh, a little bit of the bubbly.
I am hosting back in the Casino Combat VIP Lounge today, so help yourself to anything you like, including our artisanal pop and local handcrafted sodas. I've got a fun story today, or at least I think it's fun, but I did want to say that I enjoy casino stories, and I know mine are special to me, but I also know they're not unique. I know lots of other people that have their own stories that are as or more interesting than mine, and I love hearing those. Other than just the fun of sharing, my hope is that VIP lounge stories, even ones that don't specifically teach something, show you what casino normal looks like for just your average guy doing very average casino things. If you spend time in and around casinos, you will have your own stories to share, and I'd love to hear them. So anyway, years ago when my sons were younger, they were involved in amateur wrestling. And one afternoon, I'm playing blackjack at my local casino and talking with a floor person about his son's wrestling results over the weekend. Another man at the table, who I've come to know as Proud Papa, leans over and says, "My son wrestles too." And so we, of course, go, "Oh, hey, how old's your son and what school does he wrestle for?" And he gets this big grin on his face and says, "He's older. He's in the WWE. My son is." And he tells us who his son is. And so we all have a laugh over that. And over time, I run into him, multiple times, and we talk about our very different wrestlers, and we swap gambling stories over drinks. He appeared on several TV shows with his son, and we would play cards, and we'd talk about how that experience was for him or how things went. And the crazy part is that anytime we play together, we both seem to have nice winning days. And we have a lot of fun. So we often make a point of playing together if we both happen to be in the building and run into each other. He's a great casino ally. He's a fun guy to hang out with. And it's always fun to see a casino ally or his son on TV. I have spoken. Everything you heard here is true from a certain point of view. It's time for leaving, and I hope you understand I was born a ramblin' man. If you have questions, send them to questions@casinocombat.com. If you have techniques to share, send them to whatido@casinocombat.com. Don't forget, we spell combat with a K. Love it, hate it, it doesn't matter. Please share with your family and friends. Goodbye, everyone.